Okay, let's talk about fundamentals, which I think are really interesting because I remember when I was a kid, I would watch Michael Jordan play on TV and I remember watching Kobe Bryant. I remember both those guys in basketball talking about, oh, every time my game gets off, I just go back to the fundamentals, or if I feel pressure, I just stick to the fundamentals, which I thought was real interesting because clearly they have fundamentals to their sport, but I was trying to think for golf, what are fundamentals for golf? Because there's so many different things. In a lot of ways, they're very subjective in what people talk about. Some people will talk about it's fundamental to take the club on plane. Some people will say to have a certain grip, being not so strong or not so weak, or having your hands together, certain things like that are fundamental. Some people will say having a certain face position is fundamental. Some people will say a certain shaft plane coming down, fundamental. How much you're moving sideways, they'll call that a fundamental. The problem I have with that is I can kind of name examples all the way across the board of somebody who does something different in each category. I can name some players who are on the Corn Ferry Tour who have a cross-handed grip, or Matt Fitzpatrick is going to chip with a cross-handed grip instead of a conventional grip. Some people go interlock, overlap, some people go two fingers, some people are weak, some people are strong, some people are neutral, some people roll it inside, some people take it outside, some people are cross, laid off, some people are shallow, some people are steep. You can kind of go all across the board and you can find examples every which way you want and find exceptions to the rules. So I've always had a problem when people use the term fundamental because they apply it to so many things and there really is no consensus as that to being fundamental. What does the word fundamental even mean? Well, fundamental means it's something that has to apply to everybody, right? It's a foundation or a base that everybody's going to have if they're going to be good or they're going to be great at golf. That's what a fundamental is. So when I look at the word fundamental, I first think of, well, what are the true fundamentals? What are some things that is universal to everybody that they have to have in their game in order for it to work? And when I say work, I mean for them to actually be able to play good golf, play consistent golf, and be able to score. Anybody can have a bad technique and just put the club on the golf ball, move it around, shoot 120, shoot 92, whatever, and just shoot a score. I'm talking about being good at golf or something you can aim for every player. And if they can increase these skills, they're all going to improve and everybody's going to be better for having focused on them. So what I've done is I've thought about ways to try and subdivide this. What are the most true fundamentals that applies to everybody? Then from there, I created a second subcategory that I call adjacent fundamentals. Adjacent fundamentals being, again, those common cliches you hear, whether it's maybe being on plane, having a certain grip, certain face, stuff like that. Things that are commonly accepted as being good technique. However, those have exceptions to the rules. Again, look at somebody like John Rahm or Lee Trevino. They're going to roll the club inside and get more laid off, but you'd never change their swing. Matt Wolff's going to get across the line. You would never change his swing. So they wouldn't follow those quote-unquote fundamentals. So I'm going to call them adjacent fundamentals for lack of a better term. I don't really believe they're quote-unquote fundamentals because, again, if it's something that doesn't apply to everybody, I don't like using that term. It just kind of isn't what the definition of fundamental is. But playing within the common vernacular that we've commonly used in golf, we'll call those things the adjacent fundamentals. And then the final category that I've thought of or created would be personal fundamentals. Things that probably don't apply to a lot of people, but they might apply to you personally because they make you play better. So for example, personal fundamental would be something like a trigger. A trigger is something you do before you start having the club go back. Some people will waggle the club. Some people will tap the club on the ground before they go back. Some people are going to re-grip before they start taking the club back. Whatever the trigger is, that's very different for everybody. The amount of re-gripping, the amount of taps, the speed it takes, the amount of tension, all that stuff. All those things are very personal and none of them are actually fundamental to any one golfer. Everybody could have the same trigger. Everybody could have different triggers. And they're all going to work. It just kind of depends on what you like the most. So there are certain things you can do in the golf swing that you might feel or visualize or think of that makes you feel confident or makes your swing feel good or makes you hit more good shots. And those are your personal fundamentals, something that's tried and true and you can consistently go back to. It's going to make you play better. So let me rephrase that and then I'm going to kind of break those down just a little bit. So again, in the world of fundamentals, to me, I believe there are three categories of fundamentals. True fundamentals, which applies to every single golfer. Second is going to be adjacent fundamentals, which are things that are commonly perceived as being good technique for most people to have. Again, there will always be outliers. It's not something that everybody should chase. They're just generally speaking, good goals to aim for. And if you make those quote unquote adjacent fundamentals better, you're likely to make the quote unquote true fundamentals better as well. Again, not a guarantee, but it's likely to happen because of how much people have looked at the golf swing and come to a consensus on what some of these things are. Finally, personal fundamentals, which are the things you individually do on a personal basis, whether it's something you feel or something you visualize and think about, something you practice before you play, something you do in your pre-shot routine, whatever it is, something that makes you play better, even though other people might not do it, or if other people did it, it doesn't necessarily help them. Okay, so let's go back to what I think the quote-unquote true fundamentals of golf are. Well, to me, it has nothing to do with the actual swing itself. It has everything to do with how the club, the golf ball, and the ground interact. Those are the only things that are objectively true. Because otherwise, as soon as you introduce the golf swing itself, there are so many different ways to swing that it's impossible to say, okay, this is a fundamental that every single golfer has in terms of how the club is moving through space or how the body is positioning itself. How the club is swinging through space, how the club is getting positioned, how the body is getting positioned and moving, all of those things are going to affect where our club is through space, through the golf ball, whether it's the face angle itself, whether it's the path we're swinging on, how we're contacting the ground, how we're contacting the golf ball. Those things are going to affect it. But there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different pieces that can affect it in different ways. So the quote-unquote true fundamentals, what I'm calling the true fundamentals of golf, are again how the club, the ball, and the ground interact. More specifically, there are 5 true fundamentals of golf, again, in my opinion. If somebody wants to try and correct me, please. If somebody wants to try and add, please. But here's what I've come up with. Number 1, low point. Low point is, technically speaking, the lowest point of the swing where the club bottoms out at the lowest part. In practical terms, in terms of how we actually use it as a layman and how we're trying to use this, again, more practically, it's really where is the club contacting the ground in relationship to the golf ball. That's what we're really focusing on when we're thinking of low point. So when we're thinking of low point, the number 1 goal is this. Whenever we're hitting the ball off the ground, I know sometimes we're hitting it off a tee, but whenever we're hitting it off the ground, assuming the ball is not sitting up in the rough or some special lie or special exception, we're trying to get this club completely underneath the golf ball because we want to hit it with the loft of the club. We're not trying to hit it with the leading edge down here. We're trying to get this club completely underneath the golf ball when we're making contact with it. But the crux of it is we're trying to get it completely underneath without hitting the ground beforehand. We hit it beforehand, we're going to hit fat shots. We don't get underneath enough and we're going to hit the ball thin, we're going to blade it, or we're going to top it. So the goal at low point primarily is trying to get the club completely underneath the golf ball without hitting high on the ball or hitting the ground first. Now, again, that's going to be a little bit different as lies change. Your ball sits up in the rough, easier to get underneath it. You might get too far underneath it. Or if your ball's sitting down, it might be harder to get underneath it. Or if your ball's on the tee, we might be hitting higher in the face and more up. So it changes a little bit with different scenarios and clubs, but the essence of it is controlling how much are we hitting down, or how much are we hitting level, or how much are we hitting up on the ball in order for our club to make good contact with it. If we don't make good contact with the golf ball, if we're hitting fat shots and then we're hitting thin shots and it's kind of going all over the place, our ball is going to come off with different heights, different speeds, different distances. Maybe we'll fly it over the trouble. Maybe we'll hit it in the water. Maybe the ball hit the green and go over the back. So the ability to control our low point, aka the ability to hit the ball solidly on the club face in terms of not hitting it fat or thin, is the number 1 skill. If we can't do that, we're never going to be able to determine our distances. We're not going to be able to build a game plan to playing golf. So that's pretty obvious. Everybody you watch on the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, any professional golf tour you ever watch, they're all going to be pretty good at controlling their low point. They might hit fractionally thin, they might hit it fractionally fat, but more or less they're all hitting it pretty solid on the club face. When we're hitting a lot of fat shots or thin shots, like I said, really hard to play good golf when that's happening, especially if that's happening on a consistent basis. So that's number 1, being able to control that contact, aka the low point. Number 2, the ability to control our club face. Now, for a lot of people, when they think controlling the club face, they mean squaring it up so it points at the target when they get into impact, which, yes, if you're trying to hit a straight shot, it will be at the target. When I say controlling the club face, what I more so mean is being able to hit it in the direction you're looking. If you're a drawer, you're probably going to start the ball to the right. If you're a fader, you're going to start the ball to the left. If you're trying to hit a pretty straight shot, you're going to start it pretty straight towards your target. whichever direction you're looking to start it, you have the ability to start it on that line and within a reasonable degree, within a couple degrees of your target on a consistent basis. If we're trying to hit one straight and all of a sudden we hit a shot that starts 10 degrees right, then we hit one that goes 6 degrees left, well, our dispersion gets very wide sideways. Or if we're trying to play a draw and we wanted to start 20 yards to the right, but all of a sudden we're hitting it 80 yards to the right, then we're hitting some that start on target line, again, our draw is going to be very inconsistent. Some of them we're going to hit giant pushes and maybe even push slices to the right, and other ones we're going to hit pull hooks to the left. So being able to start it on the line we're looking at and within a reasonable realm of getting it on that same line. So again, if we're aiming, let's call it 20 yards right for a 20-yard draw, if we can get it to start 10 yards right or 30 yards right, I'm not saying those are exact numbers, but somewhere within a reasonable range, that way our ball starting near our line or on it is going to be important. So the ability to square up our club face for whatever shot you're hitting on a consistent basis. Because again, if your face isn't squaring up, all of a sudden your start line is going to change. And not only that, the relationship between your club face and the path you're swinging on is going to change as well. Let's say you're trying to play a draw, so you swing 20 yards to the right and your face is 10 yards to the right. Well, what happens if you keep swinging 20 yards right, but all of a sudden your face gets 40 yards to the right? Well, you're going to hit a push slice because, yeah, you might be swinging to the right of the target with your path, but if your club face is more open than your path is to the right, that ball is going to slice on you. So it's important to be able to have our face and our path in a good relationship. So number one is being able to control our face, aka let's choose, am I going to hit it to the right on target line or hit it to the left, and hit it within a reasonable window. The third fundamental is our path, which we just kind of talked about. First, we need the ability to get our ball in line. Once we can consistently get our ball in line, then we're trying to control the curvature of the golf ball. If we're set up for that same draw we were talking about, if we can't get our path right of where our club face is aimed, that ball is not going to curve back. Technically, there's gear effect. I'm going to talk about that in our fourth point. But for all intents and purposes, if we're not able to control our path in relationship to that face, the ball is not going to curve the way we want. So we might get our ball to start on line for that draw, but all of a sudden, if our path isn't far enough right, let's say we're swinging to the left of where our face is aimed, well, that ball is going to start 20 yards right, which we wanted for that 20-yard draw. But if our path is to the left, the ball is going to start right, and it's going to fade further to the right. Or if we're getting so extreme that our face is 20 yards right, but we're swinging so far to the right of our face, all of a sudden we're going to hit a giant hook left of the target. So it's number one, being able to get the path in the right orientation of the face. So again, if we're hitting draws, being able to make sure our path is always right of our face. If we're hitting a fade, always getting our path left of our face. But then from there, it's having, again, a reasonable window we're living within. That way we're not hitting massive hooks and massive slices. We want to play something that's at least reasonable for a couple reasons. Number one, you want to have enough room on a golf course to start your golf ball. If you're playing an 80-yard slice, a 100-yard slice, a 100-yard hook, you're giving up too much distance, you're sacrificing too many spin numbers, and on top of that, you don't have room to play your golf ball. If there's trees on the right or trees on the left, you don't have room to start your ball around the trees and work it back into the hole. So having something that's reasonable, we'll call it 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 yards of curvature with a driver is, I would say, reasonable. We start getting too much past that, it's very, very difficult to play curvature like that. On top of that, we start to sacrifice our contact, which is going to be fundamental number 4. If we start swiping too far across the golf ball with our path, one way or another, what happens is we start to greatly sacrifice our ability to hit the ball solidly on the club face. Why? Because if the golf ball was right here and I'm swinging in line with the target, my face is staying square for a much longer period of time. If I'm swinging way in to out, my club is coming in from the toe. I'm trying to square it up on the face, and then the heel is moving to the ball. So if this was the golf ball right here, I'm moving from the toe to the middle to the heel extremely quickly. That means if I'm hitting it off the toe or the heel, I have a high chance of catching one of those two places, and I'm trying to get lucky to hit in the middle of the face. Versus when my club is swinging down the line, it's staying in the middle of the club face for a much longer period over here. Versus again, when I wipe it, it's going from toe, center, heel, and it's moving very quickly across the face, making it less likely that I'm going to hit it solid. Same thing if I go out to in. If I were to start to come way over the top and I'm wiping hard from the outside across, well, now it's the same thing, just in reverse. I'm very likely to hit off the hosel and hit a shank. Maybe I wipe into the middle of the club face, or I wipe too much, and now I'm hitting it off the toe of the club. So if I'm coming hard across it one way or another, very, very difficult to make solid contact on the club face. So we're giving up a lot of numbers we want to see, which is how fast the ball's coming off, how high it's flying, how much spin it has. We don't have room to play our golf ball, and maybe most importantly, we're sacrificing our contact. It's going to be all over the club face. It'll be very inconsistent. And who wants to go out there and know that they're going to have a decent chance of hitting a shank during the day? Nobody wants to have that on their mind. So having our path be reasonable is going to let us have the control of our curvature, so it's curving the same way every single time. It's not curving excessively, and it lets us have the opportunity of making good contact on the club face. Which brings us to fundamental number 4, which is contact. Contact, again, like we're talking about, is where are we hitting on the face? So low point is greatly influencing high and low, but part of contact is hitting it high and low on the face. And it's also, are we hitting it towards the toe or towards the heel, or are we hitting it towards the middle? When we start to deviate away from the club face, the ball is going to come off with a slower speed. Anytime we don't flush it in the middle of the face, we're going to hit it less far than we potentially could. That's one downside to having poor contact. Most importantly, though, is having inconsistent contact. The main goal, the main fundamental here, isn't to necessarily hit the middle of the club face. That's the ideal place to hit it. That's the ideal place to live. However, that's not the fundamental. The fundamental is wherever you commonly hit the ball on the club face, because I've seen people live a little towards the heel, people live a little towards the toe. Pretty hard to live way towards the hosel or way towards the toe because the ball comes off too dead and unoptimal. But the point being is, as long as we're somewhere near the middle of the club face, as long as we're always striking in the same location over and over and over again, we're not hitting it one spot, then another, then another, then another. If we can hit the same spot of the club face every single time and it's reasonably close to the middle of the club face, guess what's going to happen? The ball's going to come off with the same launch angle. It's going to have a very similar ball speed. It's going to have a very similar backspin. It's going to have a similar amount of side spin or curvature on it. And that means we're going to be very consistent. But if we're all of a sudden hitting some shots thin and then some shots high in the face, the launch and spin changes, the distance totally changes. That's very inconsistent. And especially when we get to hybrids, woods, and driver, because of the shape of the clubs, there's a thing called gear effect, which basically gear effect means toe shots want to draw or hook, heel shots want to slice or fade, thin shots come off low with more spin, and hitting it high in the face launches high with less spin. When we're hitting a hybrid wood or driver, if we're catching that ball towards the toe, it's very easy to hit a hook, especially if we're hitting it high and towards the toe. And if we hit it off the heel, very easy to hit a fade or a slice. And obviously our distance changes when we do that as well. So we could have a shot where, let's say we're trying to hit a straight shot. We might be aiming straight at the target, our face was square, our path was in line with the target, so we should hit something straight, but all of a sudden we hit it high and off the toe and we hit a duck hook. And we scratch our heads like, how did we do that? The launch monitor said my face was at 0, it said my path was at 0, but all of a sudden I'm hitting a duck hook. Well, you hit it high and off the toe, and that gear effect, aka where you contacted the ball in the face, is making that ball hook. Or maybe you hit it thin and off the heel. Same thing, your face and your path were square, but all of a sudden you hit it thin heel and you lost 30 yards, 40 yards of distance, and your ball ended up 20 yards right of the target. Well, why did that happen? Well, again, it wasn't that your swing went way off. You just totally missed it in terms of contact, and the ball went a totally different direction. It went a totally different distance, and that's because of your contact. So contact is going to affect our direction. It's going to affect our trajectory. It's going to affect our spin. Most importantly, it's going to affect our distance. And distance control is super important to playing good golf. If we're going to have our ball travel too far, we might make our ball roll into a hazard. If our ball doesn't carry far enough, we might not fly over a bunker, or we might not fly it over the water hazard, or we might not get over the trees, and all of a sudden we're getting ourselves in trouble. If we don't know what clubs we're hitting into the greens and we don't have some form of consistency, we don't know if it should be the 7-iron or the 8-iron or the 6-iron or whatever it should be, because we don't know how far our ball is going to travel, or we're not consistent enough. So making sure we have solid contact on the club face is very much a fundamental, because we need to be able to control where our ball is going, both directionally and in terms of distance. Final fundamental is going to be speed. When we say speed, number one, the ability to create speed. Most importantly, a baseline amount of speed. Second off is going to be our ability to control our speed. So when I say a baseline level of speed, what I mean is this. We're talking about the ability to play good golf. When I say good golf, meaning we can, break 90, we can break 80, we can break par, or a different way we could look at it is if we're playing a golf course with regulation size holes, even if we're playing the forward tees and the golf course is relatively short, let's say we're playing the forward tees and the golf course is short, it's like 5,000 yards long. As long as we have enough speed to be able to reach every hole in regulation or come close, I would say we have enough speed to be a functional and good golfer. If we don't, okay, we can still enjoy golf. We can play golf for other reasons. It's going to be tough to shoot low scores, but it's going to be tough to be a quote-unquote good golfer. The other reason, other than just reaching holes in regulation, is more of a functional reason. At a certain point, if we start swinging so slow, we're not going to be able to get the ball very high up in the air. We're not going to be able to put very much spin on the golf ball, and that means we're not going to be able to hit a lot of clubs. A common thing I see in a lot of lessons is I'll see beginners and I'll see some older people, I'll see some ladies, and I'm not trying to put anybody out there, it's just that's the common trend that I see, and they don't swing very fast because they're just beginning golf, and they're maybe only swinging their driver 50 miles per hour. Well, the problem is when they swing too slow, they can hit their driver, and then all of a sudden they come in and say, you know what? I really like my 5 hybrid, but I can't hit my 5 wood well. I can't hit my 3 wood well. Why is that? Well, it's funny because I'll have them hit the golf ball and they can actually hit it pretty decently well. They can hit it in the middle of the face. They can square it up. However, their 5 hybrids flying 120 yards in the air and then it rolls out to 140 yards. And then they'll hit their 5 wood and it'll fly 100 yards in the air and roll out to 140 yards. And then they'll hit their 3 wood. It'll fly 90 yards and roll out to 140. So they have 3 different clubs that are going 140 yards in total. However, as the clubs get longer, because they have less loft, the ball doesn't get as high, it doesn't carry as far, and because of that, they think they're hitting the clubs worse, which fair enough, in a certain way they are hitting it worse, because for them, hitting it higher, being able to get the ball in the air, is a functional tool. That's a good way to play golf. We can hit the ball over trouble, we can't run the ball through trouble when there's trouble in front of us. So for them, they just eliminated 2 of their clubs. They should keep the 5 hybrid, but the 5 wood and the 3 wood is completely useless. Then they should jump down to something like a 7 iron, and then they should have something like a 9 iron, then maybe a gap wedge and a sand wedge and a lob wedge. But they've just kind of taken out half their potential clubs they could be using because they don't have enough speed to get the ball up in the air and to create enough spin and be able to stop the ball when it hits the ground. So again, you can enjoy golf. There's so many fun things about it, and I always encourage people to try and be their own best golfer. But if we can't swing to a certain threshold of speed, we're never going to be able to get the ball up in the air, have enough clubs that we can hit to where we have different tools at our disposal. And we're just basically just trying to move the golf ball along the golf course. We're not really trying to play course management and play a mental game of golf. We're just kind of aiming straight and just keep hitting it until we get on the green and then eventually get the ball in the hole. Again, that's fine, and enjoy yourself. But if we're talking about becoming a quote-unquote good golfer, which there's many different reasons to play the game, like I said, so I don't want to discourage anybody, there's a minimum threshold of speed we have to have. Now, I haven't mapped this out. I couldn't tell you it's exactly this number, but I'm pretty confident in saying that the number's around 70 to 80 miles per hour. So we'll call it about 75 miles per hour, but that's kind of in the range where people can start to hit the ball high enough. They can put at least enough spin to stop the ball on the greens when it lands on the green. They can start to fly the ball over some trouble. They can introduce enough clubs in their bag, and now they're able to play golf. So number 1 is the ability to create a threshold of speed. Number 2 part of that fundamental is the ability to control our speed. Because what does speed do? Speed greatly influences the distance we're going to hit the golf ball. If we swing faster, we can hit it further. If we swing slower, we can hit it shorter. So, for example, if we're trying to, the most basic sense, we're first trying to learn how far do we hit each club, which is going to be swinging the same speed, and we're just letting the clubs do the work. After we learn our distance with each club, assuming we're making good contact and things coming off consistently, from there we're saying, okay, I'm now going to try and control how far I'm hitting it. Maybe my 7 iron goes 150 yards, but I have a 145 yard shot. Well, I can't hit my 8 iron 145 yards, but 7 iron's a little bit too much. Well, you can either accept hitting your 7 iron a little bit past the flag, or you can learn to slow down your speed just a little bit, a mile or 1 or 2 miles per hour, and you can make your ball get more pin high. Same thing if you're going to carry the ball over trouble. If you're going to carry the ball over trouble, making sure you have, number 1, enough club to get the ball over trouble, and making sure you have the right amount of speed. Maybe you have a club where you have to hit it full speed, and if you don't swing absolutely max out, it's not going to get over the trouble, and you need to know exactly how hard you have to swing to cover the trouble on the golf course. Or maybe there's a back pin, and you don't want to go over the back of it. Maybe you want to take one extra club, which does invite the shot going over the green. But if you know how to take off 5 or 10 or 15 yards on each club, you can land in the middle of the green and roll the ball towards the back and eliminate your risk of going long. Tiger Woods has said many times that the most important skill he has is learning to be pin high. If you can be pin high, you can be one of the best players on tour. Him and Marco Mira used to always talk about that. You can find it in interviews. They used to joke around, pin high, baby. So anytime you can control your speed, you can control your distance, and distance control is paramount if we're going to be a good golfer. So let's quickly review those things. Number one is low point control. Low point control basically means let's not hit the ball fat or thin, or a very minimal amount of both how much we hit it fat and thin and how often we hit it fat and thin. The better we can get it contacting the golf ball, the more consistent we're going to be, because it's going to get up in the air and travel a very consistent distance. Number two is face. The ability to get the ball started on whatever line we're looking at and to a reasonable, consistent degree. It's not blowing one way or another. It's hitting an acceptable window from shot to shot to shot. Third, controlling our path. That way the ball is curving in the direction we're intending it. It's not curving in the opposite direction. Again, the ability to, number one, get our path in the right direction relative to our face, and then again, within a reasonable window. Number four, contact. Where are we hitting this ball in the club face? Are we hitting it low, high, heel, toe, maybe a combination thereof, which is going to affect the direction the ball goes and basically how far it's going to go for different reasons. Why? Because distance control means a lot in golf. It's one of the most important tools we're going to possibly have. So if we're hitting the ball in a lot of different parts in the face, it's going to go different directions and different distances. We live on a consistent part of the club face, hopefully the middle of it or very close to it. But as long as we're living in the same consistent part of the club face, our ball is going to have the opportunity of flying the same way with the same spin and roughly the same curvature. Which brings us to our last point, which is speed. Creating a minimum threshold of speed, and then from there, the ability to control our speed, whether it's just hitting full shots all day and knowing how far the ball goes, or if we want to hit a little harder or take some speed off, the ability to control that. That way we're controlling the distance our ball is traveling, assuming other things like low point and contact are good, because that's going to affect our distance as well. So those things are all, in my opinion, fundamental. Why are they fundamental? Because again, if you look at any PGA Tour player, and I'm talking the highest level golfers, if they get any one of those skills better, the ability to control their low point, face, path, contact, or their speed, they're going to gain strokes on the field. If any of those skills diminish or get worse, they're going to start losing strokes. If you're a golfer who's shooting 130, if you can learn to get your low point better and hit the ball more solid in the face instead of chunking or thinning it, you're going to become a better golfer. If you can learn to square up your face better, you're going to become a better golfer. So it doesn't matter how good or how bad you are. If you can get one of those 5 skills to increase, you're going to become a better golfer. So to me, that's why they're the quote-unquote true fundamentals. And those things are paramount and important. Now, again, the movements we make, the positions we get in, the technique we have, they are going to affect those true fundamentals. But they're going to affect it differently for every person. Because again, people have different swings. Adam Scott is not Jim Furyk's swing. Jim Furyk's swing is not Sergio Garcia. Sergio Garcia is not Ricky Fowler. Ricky Fowler is not Phil Mickelson. Everybody has a different swing. Everybody has a different matchup. But whatever their matchup is or whatever their swing is, they're trying to coordinate all of those movements to make their low point better, to make their face better, to make their path better, to make their contact better, to make their speed more in control. So anything we do, you should be looking at as, okay, any movement I make during the golf swing or anything I'm trying to change is a tool. It's either a tool that's going to make me better or it's a tool that's going to make me worse. And now I have a measurement. My measurement is, again, look at those true fundamentals. If I put myself on a launch monitor, maybe not on day one because it takes a minute to get used to your swing when you're making changes, but after you have some time to practice and you implement some swing changes or drills or whatever it is, you should be able to say, hey, at least one of those 5 things better be getting better. I better be making better contact. I better have better start line control. I better have better curvature control. I better be making better contact on the face, or my distance control needs to get better. If one of those things aren't getting better, or some of those things are getting worse at the cost of getting one better, then it's not a good change to make. But if you're making changes and it leaves the other ones alone, or everything gets better, or a handful of them get better, well, now you know the changes you're making are what you want to do. So you could use it as a metric to say, okay, whatever I'm trying to do in my swing, I have something to compare it against and know that I'm moving in the right direction. So again, fundamentals to me are a little bit of a tricky term because I think it needs to be something that applies to everybody, which is why I believe in those quote unquote true fundamentals. And where it becomes a little bit more room to play are the quote unquote adjacent fundamentals, which are common things that people agree upon. Again, I just say look at somebody like Adam Scott or like Tiger Woods in 2000. They have very pretty swings. Basically, if you say anything they're doing, if you move more in that direction, most people are going to say like, oh, they have the most fundamental golf swing in golf. Again, it's about matchups and how you pair things together. So ultimately, that doesn't matter. But anytime somebody talks about fundamentals, at least in the classic term they use in the past, I'm hoping to change that narrative going forward. It's basically, if you look at somebody like Adam Scott, who has this picture-perfect swing going back and through, or Tiger Woods, or Grant Wade, or Robert Roxman, players like those, you can look up those swings if you want. If you look at them, they hit very classic positions, and they would call those positions in their swing fundamental. So that will at least give you a visual what most people are talking about. Again, to me, that's not necessarily fundamental, but at least you have a reference for what that is. And then the final set is going to be your personal fundamentals, which is whatever flavor that makes you play your own personal best golf.